I was mid-sip in my morning coffee when the hose let out a wheeze like a dying mule, then nothing. Dry. Not a single drop. Odd, considering I owned the creek that fed this entire valley. It had been a blistering 100-degree week in mid-July, and my little patch of green paradise was hanging on by the mercy of that spring-fed creek that trickled past my cabin. My property sat just outside the gated neighborhood of Whispering Pines, a name that sounded like it belonged on a soap label, not a cluster of overly landscaped homes filled with nosy retirees and self-appointed lawn sheriffs. I'd been living peacefully on this land for 6 years, raising chickens, growing heirloom tomatoes, and minding my own business on the acreage my grandfather left me. That peace shattered the moment Deborah moved in 3 houses down the ridge. Deborah, a former real estate agent turned self-anointed queen of the HOA, had a face that always looked like she smelled something sour. Her attitude matched bitter and overbearing. She developed a bizarre obsession with my property, snapping pictures over the fence, calling the county with fake code complaints, even standing on a ladder just to spy on my compost pile. But cutting my water line during a drought? That was a new low. I followed the hose back toward the hill to find out what had happened. Something felt off. The ground was unusually soft-trenched recently. I trailed the disturbed soil like a detective, heart pounding. My irrigation system ran off a pipe connected directly to a filtered inlet from the creek. That pipe should have been untouched. Instead, it was sliced clean in half, zip-tied with a bright pink flag that read, "Violation removed per order." Order from whom? I muttered. I scrambled down the slope toward the edge of my land where it met the HOA zone. Just past the old oak that marked the boundary, there she stood, Deborah. Arms crossed, sunglasses perched halfway down her nose, sweating through her pastel sweater like a character on a real estate flyer titled How to Ruin a Neighborhood. She didn't even flinch when I called out. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing. She replied calmly, "You've been overwatering during a restricted period." As HOA president, I have a duty to act. I reminded her that my land wasn't in her jurisdiction. She smiled. "Water doesn't respect fences. You were setting a bad example." Then she turned and walked off, leaving me standing in the dirt with a severed pipe and rising fury. But then it hit me, Deborah had no clue. She had cut the very line that fed from a creek originating on my land. A creek that meandered past my yard, under my wooden bridge, then trickled into Whispering Pines, watering their artificial turf, decorative roses, and that ridiculous HOA golf green. They had no well. No water tanks. Just an automated sprinkler system entirely dependent on a water source they didn't own. I knelt beside the broken pipe, chuckling. For the first time in this HOA circus, I had real leverage. If they wanted a water war, I'd gladly be their general. By evening, I patched the pipe with some PVC scraps and electrical tape enough to get the trickle going for me. But the real work would begin tomorrow. First, I dug out my original property records, sealed in a waterproof bag in my filing cabinet. 2 facts stood out. 1, my property line ended 10 feet before the HOA assumed it did. 2, I had deed rights to the spring head and creek dating back 78 years. The documents were signed, notarized, and reaffirmed during a 2001 reassessment after my father passed. These weren't some gray area guidelines. This was legal, black and white proof that the creek's water belonged to me first. I marked the boundary with orange paint on old cedar posts and staked small flags in the soil. Next to the broken pipe, I left a note taped to a mason jar: "Water only flows where it's welcome." Early the next morning, I walked downstream. Whispering Pines was already suffering. Lawns once pristine were fading. Sprinklers clicked but produced nothing. Garden hoses lay limp. A crowd of board members stood around Deborah's driveway, fanning themselves and bickering. She spotted me on the ridge. I waved. Later that afternoon, a man in a tan shirt and county badge stepped onto my land. Sent by the HOA, he said, to assess infrastructure modifications. I asked if he had a warrant. He didn't. I told him to come back with one. He didn't. That night, I walked the creek by lantern light. With a few flat stones and some logs placed just right, I began to gently redirect the flow into a deeper bend that curved away from the HOA side. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even unnatural. The law said water could be diverted on private land if it didn't violate downstream rights. But Whispering Pines had no rights. Only assumptions. By morning, I had rerouted just enough water to favor the woodland bend behind my orchard. I posted a handmade sign: Private spring. Not HOA maintained. Deborah didn't approach me again, but I noticed strangers with clipboards wandering near my fence. One claimed to be from a community interest group. I asked for his ID. He didn't have one. I got a photo of his license plate as he left. I had already filed everything with the county, GPS data, drone footage, legal docs. All time-stamped. All sealed. They were the ones operating in the gray. Soon, word spread around town. Whispering Pines lawns had turned into hayfields. The koi pond was mud. Roses wilted. One board member stopped paying HOA dues. Another questioned Deborah's authority. Still, I stayed quiet, letting the pressure build. But then came the escalation. I found footprints near the upstream bend. Someone had tried to shift the rocks back. I rigged motion-triggered sprinklers filled with garlic oil and skunk scent. At 2 a.m., the sprinklers went off. The next morning, footage showed a familiar HOA board member fleeing in the dark, soaked and stinking. I saved the footage. Just in case. Their creek access was now a dry, cracked trickle. Deborah tried to hold a town hall on environmental vandalism, but stumbled when someone asked if she had permission to dig on a neighbor's land. She went red. Dodged the question. I watched from my porch with lemonade in hand. Then came the contractor. Caught elbow deep in my creek. He claimed he was hired to restore environmental flow. No permit. No name. Just mud on his boots. I told him he had 30 seconds to leave before I called the sheriff. He left. I uploaded the video to a community page with the caption, "Just trying to protect my tomatoes." It went viral. Within hours, locals chimed in, "That's Daniel's land. They have no right." 2 sheriff cruisers parked at the HOA clubhouse the next morning. Sheriff Gibbons stopped by later, reviewed my footage, and said, "One more incident and she's looking at real charges." I upgraded my defenses, more trail cams, more deterrence. A custom sprinkler mixture that reeked of garlic, fish, and peppermint sprayed another trespasser head to toe. Days later. News spread. The HOA board fractured. Some resigned. Deborah called for an emergency meeting, but few showed. One even handed out copies of my video. I hired a survey team from 2 counties over. They produced a high-res map showing the creek source, the flow path, and my legal boundaries. I had it laminated and posted it at the HOA trailhead with another sign. No unauthorized access. Violators will be recorded, reported, and possibly sprayed. Deborah finally approached. She wanted to talk civility. I told her that civility ended when she sent someone to cut my pipe. She hinted at water sharing. I didn't say no. But I didn't say yes. Then came the final ruling from the county. A letter with a gold seal. Whispering Pines had no jurisdiction over my land. I had exclusive rights to the spring and flow. I made copies. Posted them on my barn, porch, and trail gate. I taped one to the HOA clubhouse bulletin board with a sticky note. For educational purposes. The HOA chat exploded. Deborah tried to spin it. Claimed the ruling was temporary. Then the water district confirmed the HOA had drawn water illegally. That ended it. Deborah tried to launch a legal fund to sue me. Only 7 showed up. 4 voted no. One stood and said, "Maybe we should just apologize." Deborah turned red and adjourned the meeting. Later, I got an anonymous email. "Thanks for standing up to her." Lawns in Whispering Pines died. One resident painted theirs green. It turned to sludge. Complaints rolled in. Dust storms. Tumbleweeds. The HOA filed a complaint with the Environmental Review Board. Rejected. No standing. No case. Deborah sent me a registered letter asking for water access. I ignored it. The HOA hired a landscaping consultant. He advised tearing up all grass and replacing it with drought-tolerant plants. Deborah called it a green transition. No one bought it. Meanwhile, my land thrived. Orchards. Tomatoes. A mini sanctuary where the creek now pooled. A local news crew visited. They filmed the reroute, the orchard, the signs. The segment aired. It was calm, factual, and devastating. Deborah was removed from the HOA board. Mr. Holloway, a retired teacher, became acting president. He sent me a letter of apology and requested a community tour. I agreed on one condition: Deborah couldn't attend. When the group visited, they listened, took notes, and thanked me. One said, We used to think we owned this place. Now I see we're just borrowing it. I nodded. The land keeps the books. The HOA officially acknowledged the overreach and permanently ceased any claim to the creek. Mr. Holloway hand-delivered the letter with a jar of preserves. Deborah later sent a handwritten apology. She admitted her mistakes and said she was moving to live with her sister. I filed the letter in the back of my ledger. Didn't write back. Some wounds just need time. I finished reinforcing the creek. Built a bench with the words, "Let it flow its own way." Mr. Holloway visited again. The HOA wanted to install a plaque in their center quoting the article written about me, "Respect the land and it will take care of you." I said I didn't need credit, but I appreciated the thought. One evening I sat by the fire pit with Ranger snoring at my feet, listening to the soft burble of the creek. The storm had passed. The land was at peace. And for the first time in months, so was I.